Welcome to Philly Prime. I'm Dave Schratweiser. This week we're going to talk about murders in Philadelphia. It's a topic that just doesn't seem to want to go away here these days. Between the shootings, the murders, and the carjackings, it's just the top of mind topic every single week. And every weekend, we've had some brutal weekends the last couple of weeks with upwards of 20 shootings and 10 murders on some of those weekends. We're at 387 murders right now, up 4% last year when we had a record 562. There's nobody better to come talk about this right here than crime reporter for Fox 29, Kelly Rule, my former colleague, kind of took my spot when I retired. Kelly,
strong word there. Strong word.
Come on. Great to have you on the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Okay. Kel, you're out there every day. Let's talk about the murders for a quick second, and then we're going to talk about a project that was near and dear to your heart, a half-hour special you just did that aired on Fox 29, which, by the way, I will say was excellent. Comes under the title of Save Our Streets, which is an ongoing series of half-hour specials that Fox 29 is doing. And you kind of have your finger on the pulse in the street right now for Fox 29. What do you think about all this and the fact that we're still up at least 4% right now on murders?
Disheartening. I mean, frustrating. There are so many words to describe it. I think there's so many things about this that are disturbing, but what has been really troubling to see is how many kids are not just getting shot, they're getting killed, and how many kids are behind the trigger as well. They're actually, pulling the trigger in these cases. The fact that, and police have said this numerous times, when you're talking about those shootings involving children, we just had a 17-year-old girl killed over the weekend. Sometimes it has to do with the social media beef. They're saying that all the time. Social media, when I was growing up, certainly when you were growing up, social media wasn't even a thing like it was now, but there was an issue. You'd use your hands, you'd use your words. Now they're, bringing a gun to school, stashing it outside. That's been super alarming. And then innocent bystanders getting caught in the crossfire. There were two situations over the weekend where we saw that. A city rec center worker.
Yes.
Your job at the rec. I'm sure you heard about that. She came outside and was in the middle of a gun battle between, again, juveniles, they believe. She had nothing to do with it. And then a SEPTA worker, a father of 7, picked up his wife, brought her home, was walking into his house and was ambushed. And they think it was a mistaken identity case at this point. They don't think he had any reason to be targeted.
Yeah, I actually talked to some homicide detectives and some officials this week, and they said it's pretty clear that he was not the person they were looking for. Well-respected guy, great father from what I heard, 7 children. I can't think of anything more heartbreaking. When you go see people like that, and we're going to talk about this with the special, because you visited with 3 or 4 families of folks who have unsolved murders. But when you go see those folks, and this was always the most gut-wrenching thing for me, and I covered, I hate to say this, close to 5,000 murders in my career. It's the hardest thing a reporter has to do. It's the hardest thing a family will ever have to do is come to grips with this.
Absolutely. I must say it, and I'm sure you can relate to this much more than I can because I haven't been doing it as long, but that feeling in your stomach as you're approaching a family's house and knowing you have to talk to these people that after they've had the worst day or night of their entire lives. I always go into it saying that this is their opportunity to, I don't want to say control the narrative, but to give their account of their loved one. Who knows them better than them, and their family, their husband, their wife, their children. And I just think every family should have that opportunity and that right to say what they want to about their loved one. Sometimes it's therapeutic for them and they want to get it out right away. Sometimes they're not ready. And obviously we completely understand and respect that. And I always just make sure they know if they want to follow up with us down the road, they can do that at any time, which is kind of what we did for this series. But there's just no words.
There's too much pain and heartache in Philadelphia right now between shooting victims, carjacking victims, and then murder victims. It's every day, every single day. And, folks are searching for a solution. We just talked about that with Bruce Gordon talking about the mayor's race. people are just looking to City Hall and police headquarters for a solution, and the district attorney's office. And right now, they're not getting it, and they're upset about it. So not only upset about losing a loved one, but upset about what's being done about it.
Right. And it feels like it just keeps repeating itself. And what we hear too from people that maybe have not been directly impacted, but hear the gunshots in their neighborhood, see it every day like we are. And they said they're starting to feel numb to it. I mean, you get to a point where it's, what's new? This happened yesterday and it's going to happen again tomorrow. And that's an absolutely horrible mindset to be in. But we're hearing that more than we aren't, which is disturbing.
And it's everywhere in the city. Last week, 2nd and Market, 2 blocks from Fox 29, shots rang out. Some of our folks were out at dinner, I believe, right nearby when that happened. Then we had a shooting at 8th and Market, shots fired, a police chased a young kid down, had 1 or 2 guns in a bag that had been fired. And then one in the Fashion District inside the mall just 2 nights ago where shots were fired. I believe they have somebody in custody for that now.
They do.
I mean, that's in the heart of Philadelphia when you start in Old City, Center City, in areas like that along Market Street. This is not just in the neighborhoods. This is in places that you and I and a lot of folks who like to visit Philadelphia or live in Philadelphia and like to go out to eat or go shop. It's starting to come to their doorstep, and it's getting way too real.
Way too real. Couldn't say it better. What police said yesterday, Deputy Commissioner Joel Dales was talking about that situation that you referred to, Labor Day weekend, where the shots were fired and they were able to chase the shooter down. They had a police presence there. I mean, that juvenile, because it was once again a juvenile, fired their gun in front of a police presence. So what they were saying yesterday, and I think the mayor said it as well, is the scary reality is that in some of these situations, people don't care that police are there. They're still going to do what they want to do. And at that point, you kind of wonder, what more can we do then? Yeah.
And Bruce and I talked about this when we talked about the mayor's race. You almost have to promise a more visible police presence in some of these neighborhoods, in some of these areas that people travel. And that's difficult to do when you're down 1,300 cops for a variety of reasons, and you're only replacing them 75 cops at a time with a class, and it takes 10 months to train those officers. So it's a sliding scale of not enough bodies on the street.
Exactly. And they spoke about that at length yesterday. There was their biweekly gun violence briefing. And I'm sure you heard that this weekend they're going to be extending all patrol shifts by 4 hours. But the commissioner said, that's not a long-term solution. That gets us through next weekend. And will it get us through next weekend? We had an awful weekend last weekend. So they're graduating 72 new officers this Friday. They said they'll have 42 more by the end of the year. They're trying to recruit more. I mean, that's just, they've been very vocal about that. That's an ongoing issue. Yeah. What I will say, though, the police presence in those situations I was referring to, including the Fashion District, they were able to get the shooters. So they were able to arrest them and did their job. So I don't want to say police presence isn't important, because they're there and it's working because they're making arrests. What's scary about the level of violence we're seeing is that it's not stopping someone from committing an act, which I think.
So while it may not stop the shooting, at least it helps them catch the person who did the shooting.
Yeah, and then it's up to the system to do its job.
And I'm sure you saw the video on No Gun Zone of the 2 police officers chasing down the young man from 8th and Market. They chased him a good 8 to 10 blocks.
They did.
Relentlessly, including a white shirt, which is what we call sergeants, lieutenants, and above, who was in hot pursuit along with a regular police officer. And props to those guys for chasing that suspect down and making the arrest and recovering the weapon.
Yes, it was huge. And you could tell the YouTube video from that, the Philly captain, he lives in South Philly. That's what he goes by on YouTube. And he happened to find himself out there and record all of this. So it was pretty amazing. But yeah, you can see everyone's kind of getting tired by the end, including the
perpetrator.
They're chasing, but they were able to get him, which is huge. And I think in total, within that whole situation, and there might be a situation where a couple kids tried to get into the federal building, something along those lines, but they arrested 5 juveniles. So,
all right, that's our up-to-date kind of what's going on now situation. You took a very close look at something new that they're talking about. Actually, it's a return to something old, which is now something new. And I was kind of astounded by this. Kelly just did a half-hour special on a new cold case squad that the homicide unit is reinstating after standing down from it because of so many ongoing active murders and needing those detectives to do that. They're now going to go back to doing cold cases. And I was astounded at the number, and I'll let you tell folks what that number is. And you walk through the homicide unit's file room there, and I have to tell you, I've only been up there twice in my career, and it was great to get access to it, A, and B, it was astounding the number of cold cases we're talking about. What's that number, Kelly?
4,400, I want to say 49. It's definitely a little more than 4,440.
Yeah.
Which, 4,000 in general is just that number. And that's dating
mind blowing. Yeah.
Mind blowing. That room that we walked through, so that's actually the total number of homicides for the past 3 years. But that just speaks to the level of what they're seeing. And then if they want to pull from, anything further back, they have to go into an archive system. So there are those extra steps. So that room is just for 3 years. And you could see how it just went back and back and back. And each file had individual files in it. So you can see how much.
Yeah. Okay. You had a nice sit-down interview with Captain Jason Smith. He's the head of the homicide unit.
Yes.
Doesn't like to do television interviews. No. Does them at the podium a lot, but you sat down with him and actually spoke to him about this. And he seemed very passionate in your interview with him about how homicide detectives, he himself and others in the police department are concerned about these cases that are unsolved, feel the pain of the victims and their families here, and want to do something about it. Talk to us, A, about what he said to you about that passion he has, and 2, what's he going to do about it right now? He has a new cold case squad he's just putting in place.
Right. So on the passion level, and as you know, with TV, we can't show as much of the interview as we would always like for time purposes. So I was able to only show a snapshot of that, but he did just say, I think there is that misconception, especially when you're looking at that many cases, that police do not care. And he said that they get, some of his detectives, he himself, they'll get weekly calls from parents of people that, died within a couple of years ago or were killed many years ago, and they don't give up. And he was saying that police do not give up as well. It weighs on them. And it's something that, they're incredibly passionate about. He spoke very openly about that and wanted people to know that, in any case where he feels like people are not getting the information they need, they could reach out to him directly. He said there's been times where he'll shuffle things around because sometimes fresh set of eyes will help. Or if there's any situation where he feels like one of his investigators isn't doing the absolute most they could be doing on that case, he'll take them off of it, him or her off of it. So certainly a priority for them. So historically, the way the cold case unit worked was that it was part of the special investigations unit.
Right.
And talking about the numbers that you did at the beginning, they had to last year and probably the year before start to pull guys out of the SIU and get them on active homicide cases as they were coming in because of the sheer number. Just was,
right.
So sadly, in that move and with the shortages that we talked about as well, so there's several issues going on there. But with that, unfortunately, some of the cold cases went to the wayside. So it has been a priority for him to get that back, and not just back in the way that it was before, but to actually have a dedicated cold case unit. So when I spoke to him, that was in August. It's now mid-September. And he did say by mid-September, he would have 8 investigators assigned strictly to cold cases. That is their priority. And the way it'll work, he said they'll, kind of go through people who have reached out to them if there's been any new tips or leads, but it'll just involve going through old cases step by step, going through the file meticulously, seeing if they have any witnesses that are still alive that they could circle back with. And then DNA is going to be a big part of it. But
that's a big part. I heard him talk about that a couple of times. DNA technology has evolved from when I first came on the scene years ago, when it would take a year to get DNA results, to literally they can get it within a matter of hours if they use the proper test, and they can get small amounts of DNA from almost anything now, like the head of a pin almost, that can give them what they need. That could be that break in a cold case like that.
It's so fascinating. And they have made leaps and bounds, like you said. And he thinks that will be the real game changer moving forward. And that will be the absolute priority and focus for his 8 investigators, to take any piece of DNA or evidence they have and retest it and see if they can get something else, get another hit on it. And he said now that they're testing ballistic evidence for DNA, that's going to be a game changer as well. I think historically they thought that kind of burned off and wasn't something they could look at. And now that is something they can review. So that could be what gives them a break in their case at this point.
Yeah.
He also, he said the biggest struggle for them is getting a good eyewitness to come forward. That's just continues to be a problem. So in any case, when they have something like that, of course, that's going to help. But without that, DNA could be a game changer.
And Larry Krasner, we all know the district attorney in Philadelphia, likes to have a good eyewitness, surveillance video, and DNA and or a fingerprint in order to take these cases and take them full bore and charge them as a first degree, second degree, or third degree murder. The police department knows that. Jason Smith knows that.
Right.
So they have to now strive for those levels of proof. If they're going to get any cooperation from the district attorney's office to file charges, they must have something along those lines you just talked about.
Absolutely. And it can't be, a witness that, it has to be a cooperative witness. There are plenty of ways to protect people's identity. And I think that is probably the biggest fear for people coming forward. The commissioner just spoke about that the other day, about how that's always been an issue and continues to be such a big issue, having people just feel safe coming forward. And also sometimes the culture in certain neighborhoods is you don't want to be the one to give up information. So that's huge and so important. And as you've seen recently too, video surveillance is so important. So that's the first thing they're looking for now after a murder, is to scan every single camera possible to see what they have, because that can also be a game changer. And they have to act quickly, because as we all know, certain cameras they'll delete video from the day before. A system that kind of cycles it out. So they have to act on that pretty quickly.
Yeah. And they have a much better opportunity now to retrieve that and upload that and get it back to headquarters. They can actually do it from their phones now. The shooting investigation group is doing that. And they can move the video to where they need it to be held in the cloud or wherever much more quickly than they could before. They don't have to go back to headquarters and download it. They can actually do it from the street, which is an incredible development. They don't like to talk about that too much, all the little techniques and things like that, but it's incredible. Kelly, I got to ask you, and we'll segue a little bit here.
Okay.
The bulk of kind of what you did in your special was talk to, I think at least three families that I saw who had lost a loved one, some of them many years ago, who you could tell from your interviews with them are still so passionate on a daily basis about finding who's responsible. I got to believe that when you went home that night after interviewing these people, that resonated with you tremendously, because you're out there every day seeing this.
It absolutely did. First of all, for these people to have gone through what they did is already something a lot of us can't understand. For their loved one to be killed or disappear in a way that we just can't relate to. So there's that level. And then there's a level of not having any reason why. Never finding out. It's not going to bring that person back. It's not going to change the situation, but not getting that closure is just another level of trauma. And then to ask them what that would do if there was an arrest, nobody said I'd be able to sleep at night. Nobody said I'd feel better. They didn't even say it would make all that much of a difference. They just want to know. They want to know something, but it still doesn't change the fact. So it's just heartbreaking to know that even once they find out, it's not going to change things. But it's just a level of trauma that I think so many of us just can't even begin to understand. And the fact, too, that they become investigators in their own right, because think about it, when you don't have that information, it eats away at you. And the leaps and bounds that they've gone through to try to get information, I must say, is incredibly impressive. They're out there on the streets kind of playing detective in a way as well, and not to interfere with what police are doing, but just because they have to, Yeah.
And in being in a neighborhood, they may hear something in their own neighborhood about, especially if the murder took place in their own neighborhood, they may hear something. Somebody gets out of jail. Somebody comes by as a relative and says, I got something that might help you. Can you give this to the police? I don't want to call the police.
Right.
And they're more apt to get an active kind of lead like that.
Absolutely. And they said that, I know in Chucky Maud's case, that was the third one that aired in that special. They were saying that we have eyewitnesses, we've talked to people, but of course the difference between what people are willing to share with them and what they're actually going to say to police sometimes is different. So that's kind of the battle that they're dealing with.
Yeah. Can you tell us about that Chucky Maud case? Because that kind of really got to me at the end of your special.
I know. Again, they're the way these sitting down with these families was heavy. That's for sure. So 24-year-old, this was, just want to make sure I have the right date. March 12th, 2021. So he's a father of two. He dropped his daughter off at his mom's house. And just background, we spoke with his mom, father, and stepmother, and they are all now incredibly close. So of course, just through family dynamics, there was a bit of disconnect there for a while, especially between Chucky's mom and stepmom. But this whole situation really brought them together into kind of like a team effort, which such a tragedy, but to see them come together in that kind of way was pretty amazing, I thought. But anyway, he dropped one of his daughters off at his mother's house in Port Richmond. He was in his Mercedes-Benz. I think it was a relatively new car, something he was very proud of. Drove down the street, and then several hours later, his mom got a call that he was shot. And if you watch the interviews, I mean, her explaining what that moment felt like was gut-wrenching.
And his dad was first remarkable that he summoned up the courage to talk about this, but he was also very good.
So good. And you can tell he is a man that does not show his emotions usually. In fact, he said that to me at one point. I don't like to talk about my feelings. I don't like to show emotions, but he was emotional really from the get-go. And it was the one thing he said to me too. We didn't include it in the story, but he works for the union, and he said he hired Chucky to work for him.
Right.
And he was repeatedly coming late, and he felt like, he couldn't give him a free pass just because he was his son. He had to treat him like he would any other employee. So he let him go. And that was not too long before this happened. And it destroys him when he talks about it. I said to him, I mean, you did what you had to do. Of course, you never knew this was going to happen, but it's just little things like that just eat away at you. So,
yeah. Okay. Kel, if you could talk to people out there, I heard Jason Smith say this, that folks shouldn't be afraid to call them or find a police officer they know, or find a detective they know, or maybe a detective they know worked on the case, and tell them if there's new information. I will tell you that right around the time this special aired, I got a call from somebody in the police department I speak to on a regular basis, and was saying that they recently got a phone call on a very old case, upwards of 15 years old, with some new information. And information that only someone who had some kind of knowledge of the crime scene would know. So there are people out there who get out of prison, move out of the area, move back to the area, were afraid to talk at the beginning, maybe not so afraid right now, maybe see that the police department is putting resources on this. You can't urge people enough. It's not our job to do the police department's job, but you can't urge people enough that there are people out there suffering because they lost a loved one. And you might just have that one little morsel that a really good detective can run with and maybe crack that case.
Well said. Yeah, I think at this point, any information, even if you think, this seems so trivial, it seems so small, how could this help? They don't care. They want you to call. Even if it doesn't end up being something they could, move on, they appreciate it and they want that information coming in. That the whole reason for this anonymous tip line, they get so many tips that way. And that's a great way to deliver information as well if you do not want your identity out there. However, if you call them directly and you're able to provide information, there's so many ways now that they can protect you, not just through the police department. The district attorney's office also has a program. It's obviously much easier said than done, but there are so many ways now to do that. And that could be the missing link, like you said, for these families that are, have just been stuck still since that night and haven't been able to move forward. I just think I think at this point, anything. And
Yeah.
an eyewitness is such an important, crucial piece of that. Again, even if what they think they saw wasn't important, it could be the game changer that they need. So
Yeah. Well, listen, as I said, you can, if folks want to go look at Kelly's special, it's on the Save Our Streets segment of fox29.com. You can go watch it. I don't lightly tell people to go watch a half hour of television if I don't think it's worth looking at. And this is a very good special. If you don't know the pain that people have gone through in these already 387 murders this year, this will remind you. And the fact that it's over 4,000 that are unsolved, clearly something needs to be done about this. The police department is dealing with it. But this is well worth your time to go take a look at. And Kelly, I just want to tell you, you've done a really, really good job with this. I'm going to ask you to thank some others who worked on this with you, because it's not just the person in front of the camera. As I learned for the 46 years I was a TV person, I would never have been the person I was on television without the camera people, the editors, and things like that. So here's a chance to give a couple shout outs. Give me some names on kind of who worked on this with you.
I am so glad you said that. Well, first of all, I mean, in order to tell these family stories, they need to be able to speak to us. They need to trust us and be able to open their hearts and lives and relive the worst day of their life. So I cannot thank them enough for being willing to do that. And I hope in some way this helps them. I, in the face of it, but by no means did this magic come together because of me. It was mostly because of the people behind the scenes. So Shane McEachern, am I pronouncing his last name wrong?
Yep. McGackran. Yep.
Thank you. Bill Anderson, Bill Rohr, and your buddy Brian Zeli also helped out a lot when I wasn't working with him on the day-to-day turn. He was able to gather a lot of the video for us. They were invaluable, amazing. So patient with me too. This is my first special, so they were incredible. Well,
it's a heck of a start from you. I'll say it's a hell of a start for you with specials. And I have to say, all of the people you mentioned are true professionals, very good at their craft, and they do make our lives a lot easier, and they make us look pretty damn good most days. And I am proud to say that I work with those people, and I always cherish their friendship, as I do ours, even though it was short-lived. Kelly came as I had retired, and then I came back for a little bit, and Kelly and I worked together, and we have a good working relationship, and she's doing a really, really good job. So folks, do me a favor and take a look at this special. It's worth, I mean, there's a lot of specials out there. This kind of will touch your heart, and hopefully the police department will be able to do what they're talking about, and maybe add more personnel to do this and track down some cases. And be great to hear about a few of these that get solved.
That's our goal. And now that it'll be up and running, they will have more availability for their investigators to sit down with us and talk with us about specific cases. So that's something we're working on. And we're also putting, a plug out there too. If there's any case that, another family wants to come forward, we'd love to sit down with them. So this is something we want to keep going. I think it's important. And it's definitely a priority as the police department is making it as well.
No doubt about it. It's important. Kelly, thanks again for coming on. I really do appreciate that, taking time out of your day to do this. Great job on the special, and good luck going forward, folks. Catch Kelly Rule on Fox 29 every night. It's worth tuning in, and definitely check out the special, Save Our Streets. It's on fox29.com. Take a look at it. And folks, that's Philly Prime for this week. And I thank everybody for listening, and I thank Kelly for coming on, and all the folks who worked on the special. Really good TV, and we'll join you next time. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you, Dave.